Okay, hello, Miss Azzah, and welcome to our first KreARTif interview session. I am aware that you are currently abroad, and from all of us here in the campaign, we hope that you are doing well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm doing really, really well. Yeah, it's currently 11 a.m. here in New York City, so it's very sunny. It's getting a little bit colder, but yeah, no, everything's good.
That sounds wonderful. So without further ado, let's get straight to the interview. So
Yeah.
Miss Azzah, tell us about yourself.
Oh, that's such a big question. Well, my full name is Siti Azzah binti Said Sultan. I was actually born in Abu Dhabi, and I grew up living in Malaysia, Saudi, Finland, and Bahrain. I've always been really passionate in art and seeing art as a way for me to sort of deal with my own frustrations and my environment as well. So I've basically been pursuing that for the last 7 years of my life. I moved to New York when I was at the age of 16. I started college, and since then I've been, basically hustling and like trying to like make myself known within the art scene, especially here in the US. And this has always been my dream, and so I'm slowly making it happen. I do a lot of art based on my own identity, race, and cultural background as well. I started off first, a lot of my earlier artworks were more concentrated on the idea of Islamophobia and my faith, and sort of dealing with that within a Western context. But now slowly I'm sort of referencing more of my Malaysian culture within my works.
That all sounds amazing because locality and like bringing the culture towards such a great platform in New York City. Wow. So yeah, firstly, I really want to congratulate you on your success with the recent exhibition of Anak Dara,
Thank you so much.
where
Thank
you
you.
displayed hand-stitched batik songket and New York's boutique art firm Trotter and Schaller.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been such a great deal for you. Tell us about the process that gets into the work.
Yeah, that is definitely one of my goals. One of my biggest goals was to have a solo show around like my 20s, and alhamdulillah I managed to succeed in that goal, and so that was very exciting. So I started working on this new body of work actually at the start of this year. I was lucky enough to go back home to Malaysia in December and January, before sort of COVID hit. And when I was back home, I was in KL and I was in Penang. And so during that time, I really, I did a lot of documentation. I filmed a lot of things, and I gathered a lot of materials as well. So I gathered a lot of batik, songke, spices, those sort of materials for me to bring back to the US. And so I wasn't really sure with what I was going to do. I had the idea of like the term Anak Dara for so long. I knew it was a very interesting term for me because it was a term that I sort of struggled with a lot, because I never understood it in terms of like a modern context. I honestly saw it as quite an archaic form of calling someone that. And I started thinking about the idea of like storytelling. And so I was doing my master's still. I was doing my master's in Washington State University. I just graduated this May, and I have my MFA in fine arts. And during that time, I was I was taking an art history class on Native American art, and there was a term that was used by a specific tribe in in Canada, and the term was called adawaks, which meant like the idea of storytelling. And that really sort of resonated to me, the idea of like sort of intergenerational knowledge being passed on from one to another. And so that's how I sort of started to see the term Anak Dara. I never necessarily saw it as a term that meant virgin or an unmarried child. I sort of started to reframe it within the context of a mother passing down her knowledge to her child through storytelling and through oral storytelling, basically. And so once I sort of got that context and really understood how I wanted to like reframe it within my art, I had all the materials in my studio, and I also started experimenting a little bit more with performance art, and that was something that I did towards the end of my undergraduate. I did my undergraduate in New York at Parsons, and during that time, I got really interested in the idea of performance art. And so I decided to take on this form of a persona of someone called an Anak Dara, but removing my face using a green screen to sort of like illustrate that anyone can sort of take my place. This isn't just necessarily about me. A lot of young women as well can see themselves within this position where, I feel like as young women, we're sort of subjected into ideas of domesticity. And that's something that I have sort of a lot of opinions on. Just the idea of gender roles and equality as well. And I feel like I grew up with quite a progressive household where, both my brothers and my sister and we were all treated the same. And the idea of our success and our goals isn't necessarily determined by our gender. And for me, growing up, ideas domesticity, I saw it as something that was quite unisex and quite global. And so I, in a way, sort of took on this role of an Anak Dara to show the idea of how it is definitely more of a relationship between a mother and her daughter, but thinking about ideas of tradition and domesticity in a very positive way, and not something that's sort of forced upon women, but more in terms of like explored and celebrated by passing down of knowledge and tradition, rather than sort of this is something that is your job, but more in line the idea of like this is something that you can learn from a previous generation. And so intergenerational knowledge was super important to me, because I feel like everything that I've learned in terms of my own religion and my own culture are through my parents. They're the ones that taught me everything that I need to know. And so I started building this body of work back in February. And I had it completed in May. So it was around 4 months of art making in my studio. And I was supposed to have it up in a show for my thesis, but COVID hit. And so it couldn't be put up in the museum. And I actually decided to move back to New York, at the time I was working as an artistic director for a residency program. And I moved back to New York because I felt like, this is the time for me to sort of put myself within the community, because I'm slowly gaining momentum in my own personal work. And I got in touch with a curator that I've been talking to for an entire year. We met through a mutual friend, and she found out that I was back in New York. We decided to meet up, and she decided, and they officially decided to have their own gallery space, a permanent gallery space in the city. And so I was the first artist that they featured in this permanent gallery space. And that's how the show started coming along, I guess.
Wow, that was the illumination of your context with the what Anak Dara stands for. Completely transcends what people are expecting, because I know some of my friends who know your work, they weren't really sure about what it's about. Everyone has their own opinions because it's art, isn't it? But then I feel like through your illumination just now, your elaboration of how it's a intergenerational thing that passed down from mothers and everything, it gives this your body of work into something that should resonate to more of the female youth nowadays, especially growing up in Southeast Asia.
Right.
I know so many people that could benefit from this.
Yeah, this is not going along the lines of tradition and what an older generation is sort of forcing down upon us. No, this body of work is for women who are like me. I use that term almost as like a point of like controversy, because I felt like it was a good talking point. But the way I've reframed it is further away from the idea of talking about a woman's sort of sexual life or the fact that they are young and unmarried. It's sort of away from that. It's more along the terms of how my mother uses it as a term of endearment. For her, she uses it as, you are my child and I'm going to give what I've learned down to you. And that's seen through the video works that I've made, where my mom is teaching me how to make sambal, and she's telling me she's using this mortar and pestle that's been passed down from her great great grandmother. And so it isn't a term that I'm using where it's sort of a negative sort of perception of domesticity. I'm trying to see it more, I'm reframing it more within a modern context of like sort of celebrating your culture and your history and your relationship with your parents as well. I feel like a lot of the times, because, you know, I really fully believe that our generation is super awesome because, you know, we are paving a way where in terms, we're able to talk more openly about subjects that are seen as taboo. And I think that's really great because how I've grown up in terms of Islam, it's everything should be talked in open, and things shouldn't be like, you know, pushed down under the rug. More in terms of, you know, we should celebrate our differences and accept our differences as well. And so I think with our generation, there are definitely a lot of ideas and sort of topics that are seen as quite traditional and non-progressive from our previous generation that we don't really relate to. And I think that makes sense because that happens with every generation. But I really think that there are some ideas of tradition and culture that gets lost because we feel the need to sort of assimilate ourselves within a more Western context, when in fact that is specifically a result of colonization. You know, by being colonized through a Western framework, I've done a lot of my research, and a lot of my research is based on, you know, ideas of decolonization, and a really important text that have been constantly referenced towards me is Edward Said's Orientalism, where he talks about the idea of, you know, what does it mean to be the Orient and the other. And I feel like how I'm trying to make people understand is we've sort of been subjected to think that our culture and our history is seen as backwards and uncivilized, and that's because we've been ingrained and indoctrinated to think that way because of colonization. And so I'm trying to create works that are sort of decolonizing that mindset into sort of taking pride of your own culture and your tradition, but in a modern context where everyone is seen as equal and accepted.
That is so great. Wow. Okay, then the next question is a bit, well, I feel like I can answer it based on how you elaborate on that. But in all fairness, let's ask you, because it's your opinion. Well, the fashion industry has always been known as a highly competitive field.
Yeah.
And I am definitely curious about your upcoming prior to this interview, but with your answer, it all clears out. But with that being said, how did you get yourself known in the art scene in the first place?
So I started my undergraduate at Parsons School of Design, and I did my BFA in Fine Arts. And when I first started making art, I kind of wanted to push myself away from the cliched sort of trope of being a Muslim artist that made work about being Muslim. And so a lot of the earlier works that I made were mainly, if I'm being honest, I mainly painted white people because I felt like, you know, if I did that, people wouldn't really talk about, oh, this is about race or this is identity, but people will more talk about the content of the work. Because you know what I mean? And so, but then I realized how messed up that was, that I was to feel that way at such a young age, because I was only like 16, 17. And so
Mm.
I was just learning about art and like what it meant to make, what contemporary art was, and like the different
Mm.
eras within art history. So I was still learning. I think everything sort of shifted was when I was around 17, and I took a 2D modern class where we had to make like something along the lines of performance and photography art. And I came from a background of just purely painting and like traditional painting. And so I was like, okay, this is time for me to make something that was interesting and more nuanced. And so I made an art piece where it was, I was thinking about it now, it's super cringeworthy, but at the time it was very important for me as an
Yeah.
artist. I made a piece where I sort of dressed myself in all black, black tudung, black garments, everything, and I painted an American flag on like very cheap muslin cloth, taped it over my mouth, and I had a text that read above me that read, "It's not my religion that oppresses me, it's your ignorance."
Ooh.
And that piece, oh, I was like they tore me apart basically. I was criticized heavily. People were saying like, you should be grateful you're in this country. You should acknowledge that we've accepted you. Very xenophobic, sort of like biased criticism, because they
Yeah,
felt like
yeah.
I was attacking their Americanness, and in fact I was attacking the society within America that was
Hmm.
Islamophobic. And I think that was my first time receiving a critique that was
Yeah.
very, very negative. And I think from then I realized a conversation was made, and although it was very hurtful to me, it
Hmm.
was still created. And I'm like a firm believer, when there's conversation, there's dialogue,
Yes.
that's when slowly things start to change.
Yes.
And so I decided from then on I was going to make art like this that
Hmm.
they saw was controversial. Um, and so I think from then I started making works that were more focused on the idea of Islamophobia and everything. And what really kicked things off for me was when I was in my senior year. I did a piece where I had Muslim women mail me their scarves that were either white or red, and I hand stitched an American flag
Ooh.
with hijabs. And that piece got featured in a group show, and I got noticed by Huffington Post. They wrote an article about me, and I did a collaboration with ATTN and Adobe as well.
Mm.
And so from there, it's sort of like started off my artistic like practice, and like
Yeah.
people started recognizing me. And
Yes.
I started getting more involved within like the art scene in New York,
Hmm.
and getting into more shows. So I've been in 18 different group shows. And this previous one right here, that's my first ever solo show.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. That, I would say, well said with your first work. Because I sincerely believe in the content of what you did with that art platform. And I feel like as we step further into this kind of world where social issues are being fought and everything, I feel like people start appreciating that kind of art more.
Mm.
The way we're shining that kind of context and that content in art, that is just amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I wish we have more artworks that are that way and featured in our local media.
Yeah.
So yeah, right.
I think it's interesting because I've been making art for so long.
Mm.
It was only quite recent where people back home are starting to like maybe are aware of my work. And it's really interesting because I was back home for like I would go back home for like a year or so before we had to move to a different country. And before I came back to the US for my master's, I was back home working for a year. I worked as a graphic designer, and like, you know, I tried to get myself involved within the art scene, but it was like I didn't know the right people, and I always saw myself almost like not an outsider, but like I like didn't really know how to like put my like roots down in terms of the art scene in Malaysia.
Right.
And it's really funny that this started happening by having a show outside of Malaysia. But like I hope that that gives me more opportunities in order to like show works back home as well. That's definitely another goal of mine.
Oh
for
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. We're gonna help you with this campaign. Don't you worry
Yeah,
about that. We're gonna make sure that everyone in Malaysia knows your name. Knows
that would be
your work.
great. That
Okay.
would be great. Thank you.
Okay. But with social issues that are currently being raised in the world, a lot of people are fighting for social justice. A lot of people are speaking their voice.
Mhm.
In what way do you think art can serve as a catalyst for change? I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this.
Yeah, this is literally what I do in my work.
Yes.
I've been a very I've done a lot of work in
Yes.
terms of collaborating art with activism. That's basically the foundation of my work as well. And I've done several art talks and panel talks where a lot of my lectures sort of surround around the idea of activism within art and how important that is. Um, in a way, I feel like art is a huge catalyst within social movement issues.
Yes.
Mainly because I feel like, you know, when it comes to social movement issues, not everyone can go out and protest or do specific things. And I feel like artists, in a way, we have a duty to like, you know, use our skill sets and our background and our knowledge
Yes,
to make
definitely.
things more aware. So I think for me, how I've been doing that is, number one, I'm very active on social media in terms of like my ideas and my thoughts on, you know, issues that concern racism and other social justice issues. And I use that platform very extensively, sometimes a little too much, but I do make my art centered around the idea of issues that people don't want to talk about sometimes. And I think
Yeah.
that's important. A good example of this was for my thesis for my undergrad. I based on my work on the idea of, you know, Islamophobia in the US, but I used a lot of media context, and I created sort of
Yeah.
this installation where I had different collages from news media outlets. And when you go into that installation, you're slowly aware of the way the news sort of dictate um, the way things are perceived. And I think as artists, it's very important because, you know, this is the world that we're living in. Not everything is fair. There's a lot of injustice everywhere, especially with what's been happening the past few months with, you know, the Black Lives Matter marches in
Yes,
the US,
definitely.
what happened with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I think it's very important because I think there's this mentality sometimes back home where it's like, that's a them problem. That's a problem that's only happening in the US, you know? And that's a problem that's only happening in this country, and not necessarily taking a look and seeing that, you know, injustice towards anyone because of the color of their skin is everyone's problem. And especially I feel like colorism is also a really big thing within Southeast Asia. People don't acknowledge it, and people tend to sort of stray away from subjects of race because it's uncomfortable. And we think that, oh, it's 2020, that's not a problem anymore. I'm like, no, it's still a huge problem.
Definitely.
And I try to like show that within my work. I did a previous body of work where I focused on the skin whitening that's happening in Southeast Asia. And I did a whole sort of project based on, products like Fair and Lovely and stuff like that, where you're actually bleaching the skin. And so I made a fake product that turns your skin pink. And I did a whole campaign around it. I did a painting. I made boxes. I made a promo ad to promote this skin, this lotion, which wasn't actually a real lotion. I just used pink face
The idea
paint.
of it, yeah, but the idea of it.
Right. The idea behind it was basically I wasn't targeting the women that use these products, because these women are victims within social media and marketing campaigns. I was targeting the companies that in a way sort of
marketed that way.
Right. Promote these ideas of whitewashing yourself and creating inner sort of racism and with inner misogyny as well. And so I made this campaign where it turns your face pink. So I used humor. I use a lot of humor and satire in my work as well. Where because I think humor is a great tool for people to talk about subjects that they're uncomfortable with.
It's a selling point, definitely.
Right. I feel like before that, if you don't make fun of something, people tend to think oh, that's too serious, so I'm not going to involve myself in that.
Exactly.
And so the whole idea behind this campaign was this product turns your face pink, but if you read the fine line ingredients in the product, it explains all the actual real harmful chemicals, dyes, and bleaching agents that I've discovered from all different bleaching products as the main source of ingredient. And when you look at these pieces, it's sort of, I'm making fun of Fair and Lovely, and when they have that sort of ad where the person is dark and turns lighter, and sort of also focusing on the topic of how these sort of goals of turning yourself lighter in a way sort of people believe helps out with your future goals and your ambitions, when in fact it still pays to the idea of sort of destroying your own mental health within the context of making yourself fairer to feel more accepted within society. And so, coming back to your question, I think art definitely is a really, really big tool as artists to sort of have our voices be heard, because since the dawn of time, visuals have been a first sort of symbolism for people to understand what's happening. And so, I think it's really important.
Definitely, especially since in Southeast Asia, I noticed that most of the people who share Black Lives Matter post or something like that, they are posting artists. LeBron James, Billie Eilish, everyone. I noticed.
Because that's what I realized. And I started making my own infographics when it came to things that you need to know if you're an international student or you're an immigrant, if you're protesting, what are your rights, and making things a little bit more aware of where you can donate to. And a lot of, I knew at the time, me and a lot of graphic designers were okay, how can we help? How can we get the message across? And it was through graphic design and posting on Instagram, and those graphics get shared. And through that, that's how information is being relayed. And the whole Black Lives Matter movement sort of was leaning onto having information travel through social media.
And also with your point of being in Southeast Asia, people who are saying that it doesn't happen in our country, it shouldn't be a thing anymore and everything. I realized that most of them are a different age demographic from teenagers. And especially the older generation, past generation, right?
I mean, it makes sense, because I feel like an older generation, they fought for their right for independence, and I think that's something we as a younger generation should be aware of. Like older generations fought for their right for independence, and
Mm-hmm.
so that sort of for them was a place marker for things are good now.
Yes.
And I think us as the younger generation, we're kind of like, well, no, there are still problems
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
within like an office setting, within like a society, within even family households that
Yes.
we think that still affect us and that we don't really see as fair.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's always going to be a thing from one generation to another. But I really believe that this generation, especially, I'm like in between millennials and Gen Zs. I don't know where I fit in
Right.
because
Okay.
I'm like 24, but like I'm very well aware of like what's going on online and social media through like
Yes.
Twitter and TikTok. But I really believe like Gen Z is that generation that's like
Mm-hmm.
they just don't care
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna fight for what they want to fight about.
Yes.
And they were also one of the biggest sort of contributors to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of social justice
Yes.
movements when information needed to be traveled
Mm.
and sort of spread out. So yeah, I think as a generation, we're at this stage right now where we're like tired of just staying quiet and
Yeah.
following a status quo. And I think we're like, no, we have our own voice
Yeah,
and
we have our own voice. We are educated. We know
exactly.
we have the information.
Yeah,
It gives confidence to us,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I feel like a lot of your open-mindedness, and I'm someone who spent some time overseas as well. So, being someone who has spent several years overseas in more than 3 different countries, right? What are some of the differences between each countries you happen to notice in the art scene?
Mm. So for me, when I traveled a lot, I was quite young and I was still within my bubble,
Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
I was still within my bubble of like, having the comfort of like family and
Mm.
like school and structure. And I did a lot of my art. A lot of my art was like painting, painting something that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It wasn't super nuanced because I was a child, and
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking about contemporary art or anything. Um,
Yes,
it's
definitely.
right. It slowly sort of shifted when I did my GCSEs. So I
Mm.
did half of my GCSE in Bahrain and the other half of it in Malaysia.
Okay.
And I structured my course load on the idea of beauty and seeing that through dolls. And I had collected quite a number of dolls growing up, mainly because like I was very interested in. I would collect. Sounds kind of lame, but I would collect traditional dolls based on each country that I would visit.
That's not
And
lame at all.
no, but I mean, if you look at the collections, very creepy. I asked my parents to like hide it away in a box somewhere. I don't want to see them anymore. But like, it's like a bunch of dolls that I collected, and I sort of investigating the way how these dolls looked, and they're all white, and they're
Okay.
all have you know light colored hair and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and so I structured my idea around beauty seen through a Western context
Yeah.
and, referencing the Fibonacci sequence and
Mm.
like Barbie and like celebrity culture. And so I did a lot of my GCSE was focused on um, beauty through sort of man-made and like objects that have been assimilated through Western culture.
Mm.
And so I did a lot of paint of these. What I did was I painted these dolls, but I made them look super creepy and very dark because I was trying to like subvert the gaze of beauty, I guess.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and so that was like my sort of start of like exploring art in a
Mm.
more contemporary context and
Yeah.
making the content just a little bit more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got accepted to Parsons, I moved to New York in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been in and out of the US for like 7 years now. And when I first started out, it was definitely very overwhelming because the art scene here is very fast paced, very competitive,
Yeah.
and I was just a little child, and I had no idea how I was going to make a name for myself. And so when I started that flag piece, that got a little bit more sort of press and everything, and I did a lot more collaborations. And then I moved to Washington State
Yeah.
for my master's, and those two definitely have a huge contrast
Ooh. Okay.
within the art scene. In Washington, I was literally in the middle of nowhere. The campus was in the middle of a bunch of wheat fields. I was 2 hours away from the nearest city. Um, Everything was sort of, it was a small town football college campus, you know?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
very, very white, um,
Okay.
quite, quite conservative. And so I stood out very much so, being brown, Muslim, and an immigrant, you know?
Yes.
And so I think when I was in that space, it was definitely probably the hardest 2 years of my life, because I was trying to like fight for my work and have my work be understood. But a lot of the times, you know, when you're in a environment where it's very white and it's very
Mhm.
male dominated, people don't understand your work. But you know, I pushed through, and I had really great mentors. um, and so I started to like reframe my work within making it more personal rather than more broad and open, in terms of like how I was doing before, where I was focusing on Islamophobia.
Yeah.
So I think the main differences between making art in New York is, I mean, it's great because you're immersing yourself within the culture, you
Yes.
know, and I have so many places to go that's inspirational for me to make work. But definitely it's also very hard to make work because it's very fast paced and there are a lot of distractions. And in Washington, it was very closed, very, there was literally nothing to do. So I had nothing else to do rather than just focus on my art. And so that sort of helped me give like the foundation, the base for the work
Mm.
that I'm currently doing right now. And so I can I'm mainly speaking about the differences between the two within the US, because I felt like as a child growing up, I wasn't really that immersed within the local art scene, because, you know,
Okay.
I myself was still in school and still trying to teach myself. But I definitely would want to get myself more known within the local art scene back home in Malaysia, because I know there are so many dope artists that I would love to get in touch with and
Yes.
just and share ideas.
Definitely. These artists that you're probably speaking of will probably be featured in our campaign as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
but
so
with that, yeah, I also have like one input on like the dolls that you have. I
yeah.
feel like if it's creepy, you shouldn't have put it in a box. I feel like it's gonna come and get you one day you're trying to find them and
Oh,
you open a box and it's just a creepy doll staring back at you. I feel like that's
I
not a
will.
very good idea.
I'll tell my parents that then. I'll have them get rid of them or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think you need to open with your parents around you.
Yeah.
Like so,
Okay.
3 against 1, that doll doesn't stand a chance. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, aside from that, you were saying that you stood out in this very white dominant Washington college, right? I feel like
Mhm.
it wasn't about you being a Muslim. I feel like you stood out because of who you are and the beauty that you stand for. So,
Oh,
yeah,
thank
I'm
you so
just gonna
much.
have to get that in.
That's so nice to hear. Thank you.
But your dedication in arts, it spreads beyond the boundaries of just practicality. In fact, you have both a bachelor's and master's degree, as you said, in arts, right?
Mhm.
That kind of dedication inspires people. So, what are some advices do you have for people who are considering to pursue art as a career?
Um, I definitely am a huge fan of academia
Oh,
and just education in general.
yeah,
But also, I want people to be aware that it's not necessarily something that you need to make a name for yourself within art. I did it because I loved learning and I loved like sort of pursuing art within like an art education sort of background. But that being said, being an artist of color and learning art and going to art school is not easy.
Yeah.
And I have faced so much like prejudice and just comments that have really broken me down a lot several times. But you know, I managed to like brush it off and just keep on going. And it's not, if you're someone that like takes things to heart, it's not going to be easy for sure. And so I definitely do encourage people, like, if you want to study art, go for it, you know, but
Yes.
make sure you do your research in the school that you're going to, and you have a very tough sort of um, mentality where you're not letting people get to you, because
Yes.
you're going to be seen as a trope no matter where you go. The art world in general is one whitewashed and very male dominated. It has
Okay.
been since the very start.
Okay.
And trying to break that scene is going to be hard, but it's going to be so much worth it. It's going to be super worth it. So I think an advice that I would give definitely is, don't think that you need an art education
Yes.
to pursue art. It's definitely it's a great thing to have in your pocket for sure. I mean, I did it. I studied art for like, yes, for like 7 years or so. Like I did it because I wanted to, and I felt like I need to like the practicality between like, you know, a mindset of like art theory and criticism, because a lot of my art does stem from research for content first. But that's not the case for everyone. So I feel like if you do want to pursue art in art school, definitely do your research. Find places that are affordable and you're able to get your, you know, scholarships and loans towards, if you're doing a BFA. For an MFA, you should not be paying for your tuition. There are definitely schools out there that are tuition waivered schools, and that's what I did. So I didn't pay anything for my MFA. I was a TA, and so I was a teaching assistant, and that paid for my MFA. And so I think that you should not go in debt when it comes to making art, because it's a practice that already has a stigma of leaving you as a starving artist. So you don't want to be more in debt before you become a starving artist.
Yeah, don't
you know?
give them more reasons to like make memes about you, right?
Exactly. But there are opportunities for you out there. There is definitely a living in terms of making art. There's so many things that you can apply to. You can go into being a curator. You can be a sales associate with an art. You can definitely also think about doing artistic direction. Think about sort of, you know, archiving within an artistic context as well. There's so many different paths for you to take in terms of like creative works, that you shouldn't subject yourself to something that you think is going to give you a great future because it's in math, science, or you know what I mean? Like the art scene definitely has a place for you. You just got to do your own research. Also, use the internet. That's how I got a lot of my gigs and my art opportunities, was because of the internet and networking. I'm not talking about like networking through LinkedIn. That doesn't necessarily work for art. I'm talking about like networking by going to art events, talking to different people, telling them who you are, what you do, have your portfolio ready. If people email you, they want to look at your portfolio, send it over to them, have a website made, dedicate on your Instagram to your art, and your Twitter and TikTok. You know, we're at this age where we have so many different platforms for us to sort of make our work known. And it's going to be, it took me 7 years, you know what I mean, for people to start to get to know who I am. So it's going to take time.
Trust the process, though. Trust the process.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely don't give up. I think something that I wish someone told me when I first started making art was to not, you know, doubt your work, because that's something I still do till this day. And I feel like as artists, especially as women and people of color, we constantly doubt ourselves because we're in an environment that doesn't really necessarily accept us. But you know, if we build a community for ourselves, that's where we can feel acceptance and move together and forward together and not leave anyone behind. So I think, yeah, that's my advice.
Those are some wonderful insights. Then, and you all watching this, you guys better take some notes. If you guys want to be artists, you listen to the man. Okay, the man in this sense isn't just like a gender based, but it's more like listen to Azzah, listen
Yeah,
to
no,
the person that you need
I
to
got
listen
what you
to.
meant. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this has been such an insightful interview. I can't even me. I'm not pursuing a career as an artist, but I'm still like, oh, maybe I should be an artist.
Well,
Because
I mean, yeah, anyone can do art, and like there's good art and that's bad art, but it's still considered art, so anyone can technically do it. Something I would say for people who are interested in art is, support your local artists. Like, it's it's hard for us to make money, so if you're able to like support us by buying our work or like promoting our stuff out there, that goes a long way. And like, having my friends buy prints of mine and like not asking for a discount, or like
yeah,
very supportive, that means so much to me, because then it's like not
you want
necessarily
it. Yeah,
yeah, I
it's
feel
not
like
because of it's your friend. It's because
exactly
you adore it.
it's exactly it's like you support my work and you genuinely
Yeah,
believe in my work. And
definitely.
yeah, I think definitely support your local artists, because we need all the help that we can
There we go. Those are the perfect closing statements. I can't say it any better. I mean, you listen to Azzah, guys. You listen to Azzah and everything will be fine, all right? Wow, this has been such a lovely interview. It's so nice talking to you, and it's been such a very educational one, yet it feels so. I feel like it just transcends the barrier of interview into something more of like just a conversational education, you know?
Well, I'm glad because I do have experience in like teaching art, and education art is very important for me.
Yeah,
So I'm really glad that you sort of you learned something through this,
yeah,
and
definitely.
hopefully those who are watching this are able to learn something and get themselves a bit more familiar with what art is and what a lot of young artists like me are doing as well within the field.
Okay, that's thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Awesome.
for